Welcome back to the CB&Q in Wyoming. I'm Mark Pruitt. This video begins a three-part look at the track plan. We'll go through how the plan is laid out and how the different parts integrate into what I hope will be a cohesive and fun-to-operate model railroad. Why three parts? Well, I don't know about you, but I much prefer taking something like this in several small bites rather than one huge meal. So here we go. What you're looking at is the model portions of both the Chicago, Burlington and Quincy and the Chicago and Northwestern railroads in Wyoming laid out on a map of the state. It includes the line from Laurel, Montana through Frannie, Wyoming and on through the model communities shown here to the division point at Casper, then on to Orange Junction. The Burlington branch from Frannie through Powell to its end at Cody is modeled, as is the CNNW Cowboy Line connection from Crawford, Nebraska to Orange Junction, then from Showbone to Lander. Let's talk briefly about the operating era and my goals in designing the layout. The era is not rigid. It's primarily the period from 1930 to 1945, but will include one or two anachronistic but not glaring elements. As far as goals, I wanted to capture the single track and the vastness character of the railroad across the high prairies of Wyoming and the smallness of the trains against the mountainous parts of the line. I also wanted to include those locations that left an impression on me while growing up in the state. Several of those are listed here. In terms of size, they run the gamut from an entire side of one peninsula to just over 1 square foot. We're standing at the doorway to the train room. You can see marked on the floor the different peninsulas and the outline of all of the benchwork for the layout. Let's look at each section in turn. We'll start with the Northern Pacific. As we go, watch the red ball that's about to appear in Laurel Yard. And there it is. The Northern Pacific part of the layout runs from Laurel Yard through one side of a large hidden staging yard, around a turnback curve, back through the opposite side of the staging yard, and right back to Laurel. Modeled on the layout will be the large yard at Laurel, Montana. The large hidden staging yard is actually two 4-track yards adjacent to each other, one representing Seattle and the other representing Minneapolis. The one closest to the wall at the top of this diagram is Minneapolis. The turnback curve on the right wall makes the NP on the layout function as a large oval to provide a continuous connection through Laurel Yard. Let's go back to Laurel and take a closer look. Laurel's classification tracks range from 8 feet to almost 14 feet long. It also has a rather large engine terminal. The entire Laurel Yard area is about 21 feet long by 6.5 feet wide. The classification yard area includes 4 classification tracks, a caboose track, and arrival and departure tracks, and of course the main line. The engine terminal includes a large 12-stall roundhouse and 6 garden tracks that are fed by a 130-foot turntable, which is large enough to handle the Z6 Challengers that routinely rolled into and out of Laurel. This full-service facility includes a 2-track RIP, or repair in place, yard for rolling stock. A central feature will be the large coaling trestle, a signature of many Northern Pacific engine terminals, including Laurel. There is also a 2-track maintenance of way yard on the opposite end of the complex. The drill track will extend from the double crossover at the lower left of the yard. It will actually be the end of what I call the Frannie Cutoff, I'll cover that later, which parallels the Northern Pacific main line around the left side of the roundhouse. Even though my Laurel Yard is pretty good sized in terms of home layout yards, the model doesn't hold a candle to the real Laurel Yard. Here's an overall shot of the real yard taken in 1946. The facility was, and even today still is, huge. This is one of my earlier efforts to represent Laurel Yard. As you can see, it's much smaller than my current plan. It consisted of 2 body tracks and a very small engine terminal. The idea was that it would interchange cars between the NP and the CB&Q, with the engine terminal servicing and turning around the Burlington locomotives that came into Laurel from Frannie and locations south. NP trains would simply swap out 10 to 15 car cuts and then move on into staging. During my few years in South Carolina, I had room for a much larger layout. I expanded Laurel considerably from that small previous version. Here I had room for 6 body tracks, the shortest of which was about 15 feet long, and a large engine terminal which you can see taking shape in the distance. This one really opened my eyes. For the first time, I was building a model that gave me the feel of a real prototype railroad yard. The effect so overwhelmed me that I resolved to shoot for something similar on any future layout, even if I had to compromise on other aspects. Here's Laurel Yard outlined on the basement floor. We're standing in the doorway to the train room. The far end, where one of the backdrops sits curled up, is where the roundhouse and turntable will be located. Off camera on the near left wall is where the staging tracks will be, and on the far left wall, also off camera, will be the turnback curve. Now we come to the Frannie Cutoff. The Frannie Cutoff, that's my name for it by the way, represents the connecting line from Laurel, Montana to Frannie, Wyoming, which is the junction point for the Cody branch and the first Wyoming stop on the north end of the CB&Q's Casper subdivision. From Laurel through Bridger to Fromberg, Montana was Northern Pacific trackage. At Fromberg, the Northern Pacific ended and the Burlington began, with the Casper sub heading south. Burlington trains had trackage rights over the Northern Pacific from Fromberg to Laurel. There was no place to turn locomotives on the main line north of Grable, Wyoming until the trains reached Laurel. Watch the red ball again, starting where the Frannie Cutoff begins in Laurel in front of the roundhouse at the double crossover. It parallels the NP main line around to the back of the roundhouse, where a steady 1.6% grade commences up to Frannie on the opposite side of the room. Where the cutoff parallels the wall of the room, it's hidden trackage behind Lander on the Lander branch of the CNW and behind Level on the CB&Q. Those are shown here for orientation. The cutoff ends at the Oren-Frannie interchange yard on the opposite side of the room and nearly a foot higher in elevation from where it began in Laurel. For layout operations, the Frannie Cutoff actually represents 3 connections on the layout: the Laurel to Frannie line at the north end, the Burlington line at the south end from Orange Junction to Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and the CNW line from Orange Junction to Crawford, Nebraska. That means Laurel actually represents Laurel, Crawford, and Scottsbluff. I just call them Laurel and Frannie Cutoff for simplicity. And you've probably had more than enough of this for now. In the next video, we'll go over the main line of the layout, the CB&Q in Wyoming itself, that ran from Orange Junction all the way through Casper and up to Frannie. Part 3 will cover the branch lines to Cody and to Lander. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.